Hark, you're also involved in the FAT program, correct? Fiduciary Advisory Team. You are one of the advisors. And you've devoted your law practice to helping people come up with solutions through your mediation practice. Can you give us some examples of how that works in the estate and trust world?
Sure. Of course. After 25 years mediating and 40 years being a family-based lawyer, the things that we see are an expression of people who have what I would call a total loss mentality when somebody dies. And what we see in mediation and in estate litigation is that much of what is brought to be decided is as a result of family history, family rivalries, preferences shown by parents for one child or another, and then meeting out their own sense of judgment through good or poor estate planning. Depends on how you look at it. The mediation part of it for me is giving people an opportunity to vent whatever is important to them.
There you go.
Meaning that sometimes they have to tell their story before they're ready to help be part of the solution. And that's one of the most satisfying pieces, is the transition from being adversaries to being somebody who gets to tell their story and is acknowledged for the truth for them of whatever is important.
I would imagine that's a pretty common theme in the mediation process.
Well, it is, but there are also robbers and thieves and forgers and embezzlers who come along the way, and sometimes you get one in your family.
That's when you call the forensic accountant in and say, we need to figure out what really happened here, right?
If it isn't already all gone.
Yes, that's true.
It's true. You can reach Harcourt Hervey at his email address, which is harcourthervey@gmail.com. HarcourtHervey @gmail.com. harcourthervey@gmail.com. So, common disputes that you're involved with respect to, well, estates and trusts. You alluded to a few of them, but maybe you can get some more specifics.
Oh man.
Oh man. Oh man.
In family summit conferences, and I know you may want to ask something about that, but in family summit conferences, we've had as many as 10 children actively involved in a mediation dialogue in one room. And sometimes it takes some coaching, sometimes it takes it, but what's so interesting is many times when left to their own devices and having a chance to talk things out with simply a neutral in the room, like Steve or myself, they come up with better solutions than we could possibly think of.
Oh yeah?
And one that's the most dramatic that I ever had in an 8-child mediation over the death of the parent was the quietest child in the 8 saw that there were 2 family members, 2 siblings, who were just going at each other, hammering tongues. And he leaned over to my partner in mediation, Peggy Hopkins, who said, "If I gave my share up, would this help solve the problem?" And everyone was so embarrassed that they settled the case without taking that young man's money. That was what we call that transformational experience, when the humanity comes out and there's an opportunity to be a good guy.
Talking with Harcourt Hervey, he is a mediator. His email address is harcourthervey@gmail.com. Now you kind of alluded to family summit conferences. Why don't you go back and tell us more about that?
Sure. In 2011, my mediation partner and I had a 7-child mediation. It's the biggest mediation we had done that year. What was so interesting was that Peggy, who comes from a healthcare background, and 30 years of negotiations with patients, families, and medical personnel, said, you know, one of the things that's not happening here is people are not listening to one another. And if you, Hark, would be willing to prep people before they come to sit down and talk to them and say, you're going to have an opportunity to tell your story, however you want to do it, and you're going to be acknowledged for that truth. And we're going to do that with everybody. And then we'll go into caucus. We'll break away and we'll take a few of you at a time to find out if you have some really powerful ideas. Well, I demonstrated this in several other mediations and on a public forum on how it worked. And what happened was there was a move in Southern California to try to adopt a model that allowed people to tell their own stories and not to just stay with the facts of the litigation. It's worked very well.
It's worked well, huh?
Yeah. About 94% success, even though some have taken a couple of sessions, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, but we usually get it done.
Family Summit Workshop.
Family?
I have on here Legal Affairs Workshop for Nonprofit Organizations. How's that work?
Oh, I've been doing that since 1990, and I just volunteer to sit as a resource person in a roundtable setting with church groups, community service organizations, public libraries, senior citizen centers, just simply to manage conversations about any questions that people have about estates and trusts and wills and powers of attorney and those sorts of things. And what happens is, it turns out that the group has lots of knowledge, and that in any one of those little legal affairs workshops, which are usually 15 or 20 people, they come up with better solutions than I can. I mean, their life experience and practical experience has been terrific in terms of a group which already know each other to become more intimately connected with the important things in their lives. And it's been an absolute joy for me. I've done about 165 workshops since 1990, and I've just had more fun than a barrel of monkeys.
I second Hark's statement on that. I think that sometimes everyone feels like maybe my voice is not being heard. And I think if you give somebody a forum to let their voice be heard and know that they've been heard and people understand where they're coming from, it alleviates a lot of problems. And also Hark's mediations saves massive attorney's fees sometimes in trials and everything else, where it's solved in a very reputable way and a way that everyone walks away feeling very good about.
Well, one thing we know for sure is that you don't really get to tell your story in litigation. You're not necessarily given that opportunity in trial to sit up there and tell your story, because usually, you know, there's a way that evidence is
It's
presented.
It's not like Judge Judy on TV.
It's not, no. So and a lot of times that is what people want. They want their story to be heard, and they want an answer sometimes, or they just want to know what happened. And so giving them that opportunity in a setting like that is a great idea for estates and trusts and for other types of cases.
Other types of things, yes.
Well, you mentioned saving on fees. I would imagine, in addition to that, you're saving families. I mean, I would say that's a big part of not having to go to the chopping block, so to speak, and being able to settle it there.
I think that's true. If there's anything to be said, is that at least the concept of a roundtable discussion rather than armed warfare has a much better chance of creating better understanding in the process. And we've seen a lot of that in the last 25 years.
Well, I think it's a great service the two of you provide, and you're obviously very passionate about what you do, and I'm very thankful that you're here to share your message with everybody out there. To get a hold of Hark Hervey, it is his email address, harcourthervey@gmail.com. harcourthervey@gmail.com.